House will come to order. Members will be at their seats. The clerk has opened the roll, and you may record your presence. Please rise and give your attention to our guest chaplain, the Reverend Rachel Pryor, the Kansas Interfaith Action Chairman, guest of Representative Owsley, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Representative Chuck Smith.
Let us pray. Across the differences of our many faiths, across divides of conscience and culture, we call with varied names upon the holy presence that inspires and surrounds us. And one name we give this holiness is truth. As witnesses, we swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. It is a reference to the sacred words of Exodus 23:3. Don't take sides with important people to do wrong. And when you act as a witness, don't stretch the truth to favor important people. Some of us call upon a God who demands truth even in the most hidden places. Some of us seek salvation through a rabbi who said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Truth distorted is a bully. Truth sanitized is manipulation. Truth censored or stretched is no truth at all. We are living in a moment when the very existence of truth is called into question. Yet who is God if not the source of truth? When we speak of what we hold sacred, no matter the convictions of our faith or conscience, we are speaking of truth. The whole truth is wisdom and life. Where lies sow hate and build barricades, truth nurtures trust, compassion, and unity. Truth can be costly, but it is the price of freedom. So may the work of this House, of those who serve the cause of liberty and justice, be guided by an unaltered truth that favors all Kansans, important and unimportant, of equal human dignity. May we speak truth, know truth, and live truth, whether in this lofty chamber, behind closed doors, or in the hidden depths of our own hearts. May truth be our way and our life for the sake of whatever we call upon as sacred. Amen.
Has every member had an opportunity to record their presence? The clerk will close the roll and record the attendance. Introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
House Bill number 2707 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning elections relating to the crime of corrupt political advertising, expanding the scope of the crime and clarifying the application thereof. House Bill number 2708 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning medical marijuana relating to laboratory testing and licensure of persons, establishing standards for laboratory licenses that test medical marijuana. House Bill number 2709 by the Committee on Taxation, an act concerning taxation relating to sales and compensating use tax, providing for sales tax exemption for a not-for-profit corporation operating a community theater. House Concurrent Resolution number 5029 by Representative Sutton, Will Carpenter, and others, a concurrent resolution making application to the Congress of the United States for a limited national convention for the exclusive purpose of proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States, establishing term limits for members of Congress.
House Bill 2480 appears on the consent calendar for the third day. Is there objection? Seeing none, it will be advanced to final action. House Bill 2564 appears on the consent calendar for the third day. Is there objection? Seeing none, it will be advanced to final action. Final action on bills and concurrent resolutions. Members will be in their seats. The clerk will read.
House Bill number 2480 by the Committee on Water, an act concerning water relating to the financing of public water supply projects, allowing financing for projects that are related to the diversion or transportation of water acquired through a water transfer.
Final action. Members will be in their seats. This constitutes final action on House Bill 2480. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had an opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Representative Hoffman votes aye. Representative Jacobs votes aye. Representative Lee votes aye. Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Seeing none. Any other changes of vote? Seeing none, 118 having voted in favor and 0 against the passage of House Bill 2480, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action. Clerk will read.
House Bill number 2564 by the Committee on Insurance and Pensions, an act concerning insurance relating to risk-based capital requirements, updating the version of instructions in effect.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2564. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had an opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, 118 having voted in favor and 0 against the passage of House Bill 2564, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Speaker recognizes Majority Leader Hawkins for a motion to resolve into the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the purpose of considering those items under the heading of General Orders.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. The Speaker appoints Representative Tori Marie Arnberger Blue to chair the Committee of the Whole.
Good morning, body. I curled my hair today to be up here. All right, for the first order of business, House Bill 2489. For the purposes of carrying House Bill 2489, the chair recognizes Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There were committee amendments. I move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. Motion passes and the committee report is adopted. You may continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, HB 2489 would make several changes to the TEFI Act. You may remember last year we passed Senate sub for House Bill 2074, which enacted the Technology-Enabled Fiduciary Financial Institutions Act, TEFI for short. In that legislation, we established a joint committee on fiduciary financial institutions oversight. That committee met December 7th, and we heard testimony from both Beneficient, who is the TEFI in question today, and the Office of the Banking Commissioner. The OSBC presented us some recommended changes to the TEFI Act, and the Oversight Committee recommended the changes be turned into bill form and introduced into the respective committees on the House and Senate side. In the meantime, the Oversight Committee urged both Beneficient and OSBC to work together on the recommended changes in order to avoid any unforeseen negative impacts on the TEFI Act. The language in the amended HB 2489 reflects the compromise between Beneficient and OSBC, with the thought that additional changes can be reviewed and recommended after the initial examination is performed by the OSBC. The bill would amend terms and definitions within the TEFI Act, as well as fingerprinting requirements, and adds fiduciary financial institutions to the definition of financial institutions provisions pertaining to the mandatory reporting of abuse, neglect, or exploitation of certain individuals. It also makes changes to fees, assessments, management and control, and examinations. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll stand for any questions.
Does any member desire to speak to the bill? The chair recognizes Representative Wassinger.
Madam Chair, I have an amendment.
The amendment appears long. Can you explain your amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair and body. This amendment changes this bill technically. It allows on page 20, following line 12, by inserting the last sentence in the paragraph, all rules and regulations adopted pursuant to this section shall not expand the administrative powers or duties of the Commissioner beyond those powers or duties specifically granted under this Act. Such rules and regulations shall not substantially alter the legislative intent regarding this Act. The reason I'm doing this, as former chair of Joint Rules and Regulations, I'm not sure all of you realize that we have no voice in any rules or regulations that are developed in this, in any administration, any bureau within the state. I don't want to be doing rules and regulations for everyone, but this says if there's something that's not right and goes beyond legislative intent, that we would be able to tell them to go back and make sure it follows basically the rules. The issue is that most state offices are doing legislation and passing regulations changing the statutes. I'm concerned about that, and I think we need to make sure that you all are concerned as well. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Representative. Is there objection to waiving the reading of the amendment? There is objection. The clerk will read.
Page 20, following line 12 by inserting section 11, KSA 2021 SEP 92322 is hereby amended to read as follows. A, pursuant to KSA 91713 and amendments thereto, the Commissioner shall adopt rules and regulations on or before January 1, 2022, as are necessary to administer this Act. All rules and regulations adopted pursuant to this section shall not expand the administrative powers or duties of the Commissioner beyond those powers or duties specifically granted under this Act. Such rules and regulations shall not substantially alter the legislative intent regarding this Act. B, the Office of the State Bank Commissioner may enter into contracts for technical assistance and professional services as are necessary to administer the provisions of this act and to meet the deadline for the adoption of rules and regulations provided by this section. Such contract shall be exempt from the requirements of KSA 753739, 7537-102, and 7537-132, or any other statute relating to the procurement of such services. On page 22, in line 30, by striking and inserting a comma, also on line 30 before R by inserting 92322, and by renumbering sections accordingly. On page 1, in the title, in line 5, after the first semicolon, by inserting limiting rules and regulations authority of the Commissioner. In line 8, by striking the first and inserting a comma. Also in line 8, before the second and, by inserting and 9-2322.
Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? The chair recognizes Representative Heiberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Will the maker of the amendment stand for a couple of questions?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Does any administrative agency have the authority to issue rules and regulations beyond the authority granted to them by statute?
What I've been seeing, in particular, I'll use the Department of Labor. They changed workmen's compensation law with 6 new regulations. I was upset with that because I said you need to go to the legislature if you want to change workmen's comp law. But they're changing it by regulation, and I don't think that's correct.
Okay. If an agency exceeds its authority in that way, what's the remedy?
I would imagine that it would be maybe one thing that they had done. They're less likely to go ahead and abuse the ability to do rules and regulations if we make them take a second look at it.
If the commission here exceeds or violates the conditions in your amendment, what would be the remedy?
Then I would imagine that it would go back to joint rules and regulations, and we would tell them that this certain regulation is not within our legislative intent, and they would have to go back and change it.
Thank you. Well, I guess I respectfully disagree with the maker of the amendment. I mean, anytime any agency exceeds its authority by issuing a regulation that goes beyond the authority granted by statute, it's subject to judicial challenge. I don't think this added language changes that at all. I think it's not, I understand the intent, but I think it's not necessary, and I would be opposing it.
Representative Miller.
I thank the representative from Douglas for making the exact point that I wish to make, so I'll merely underscore what he said. If, as the carrier of the amendment stated, the Department of Labor exceeded their authority by writing those 6 regulations, if it was beyond their authority, the way to fix that, the only way to fix that, is to go to court and demonstrate that and have the court rule that they were without authority to issue those regs, and those regs are not applicable to anything. If you read the amending language in this amendment, it establishes exactly the same situation. If they adopt a regulation that exceeds their authority, the only way to fix that is to take them to court and prove that they did exactly that. You can vote for this amendment if it makes you feel better, but that's really all it does, is maybe make you feel better. It doesn't change the way things will work one way or the other. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my preference would be to not put this amendment on. My feeling is that this was a compromise reached between beneficent and the Office of the State Bank Commissioner. They were miles away when we started this. And I asked them to go back and try to negotiate out to where there was an agreement, and they came back with a compromise, both happy with it. I would like to leave it at that compromise. My other concern is that after spending decades in the banking world, that I have a certain respect for not meddling in something that I may not have the experience to do, that myself as a legislator, I mean, I may be one of the few bankers in here, but that we would decide something based on what feels right but is not right to protect those customers, those clients that are a part of that banking organization, and that we should have some reliance that some of what is being done for the good of the public as well as for the bank. But I have a healthy respect for having guidelines. So my preference would be to leave this out and leave it where the compromise was, and have it where both of them are their efforts came up with something that I think was good and exactly what we shoot for, to have both sides on the same page. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in opposition to the amendment. Believe it or not, I had not planned to be at the well for more than about 10 words today, but this amendment is an area where I have some experience. For those of you who may not be familiar with the work of the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulations, that committee changes leadership each year. One year, the senators are the chair and the vice chair and the ranking member, and the next year, the House members are the chair, vice chair, and ranking member. So the representative from Hayes is our outgoing chair. We haven't met yet this session, but I'm sure the Senate will provide us with someone to serve as the chair. So I guess I'm now on my 4th or 5th chair in Administrative Rules and Regulations. Let me first address the concern that was raised about Department of Labor regulations. Indeed, there were, I believe 6 is the number. I did not do research because I didn't know this was coming on the floor. There were a group of about 6 regulations that were recommended by the Director of Workers' Compensation, who is a part of the Kansas Department of Labor. Those regulations were drafted, they were circulated amongst stakeholders. That included insurance companies, self-insurance plans, their lawyers, as well as folks who represent claimants. So they were all involved in the preparation of these regulations from the get-go, if you will. The regulations, though, that are proposed by an agency, whether it's Department of Labor or any other agency, do not become law just because the agency recommends the regulation. Instead, they go through a very complex review process that includes, for example, the division of the budget regarding the financial impact, the Secretary of State's office, the Department of Administration. But most importantly, they are reviewed by the Attorney General's office. And the Deputy Attorney General in charge of this process appeared at the last meeting of the Joint Committee. And she explained to us that before the Attorney General approves a proposed regulation, he or she must determine first that there is, in fact, statutory authority for the agency to promulgate the regulation. In other words, if there's not a law that says the agency can regulate in this area, the Attorney General disapproves the regulation, and that is the end of it. There is no appeal or no effective appeal from that determination. The second thing that the Attorney General does is, assuming there's statutory authorization, then the Attorney General looks to see if the proposed regulation conflicts with existing laws. So we might give the Department of Labor the authority to adopt a regulation, but if the regulation comes out and conflicts with a law that the legislature has already passed, the Attorney General disapproves the regulation, and that is the end of it. The third thing that the Attorney General does is looks to see if the proposed regulation conflicts with existing Kansas case law, in other words, court decisions. And once again, if it does, the Attorney General does not approve the regulation, and there is no effective appeal from that determination. So before any regulation even starts down the road of seeing the Joint Committee or public hearings or even publication, the Attorney General has already signed off on it and certified that the concerns, such as our former chairman expressed, do not apply to that regulation. The AG is saying there's authority to do it. It does not conflict with the law. It does not conflict with what the legislature has done, and it does not conflict with case law or decisions. In the case of these particular 6 regulations, the Attorney General made the necessary certifications. We held the hearing at the State Rules and Regulations Board. A few weeks later, the Attorney General revoked his approval of, as I recall, 3 of those regulations. As I understand it, and this is merely through hearsay because the Attorney General did not come to the Rules and Regulations and explain why he had changed his mind, but I think the general reasoning was there have been some recent court decisions after we approved the regulation, and these regulations, some of them would conflict with those court decisions, and that's a simplification, but that's the general concept. So the Attorney General revoked his certification. Now, as to whether or not that's legal, once having certified it is complying to come back and change your mind, that's a question that could go to court and be determined. But my best information is that the Department of Labor does not intend to enact the 3 regulations that the Attorney General had first approved, but then later disapproved. In other words, the process works. This legislation, of course, has nothing to do with the Department of Labor. Instead, this amendment really restates what the long-standing law of Kansas is. That 1, the regulations adopted have to be within the law that we have passed. It can't be expanded beyond the authority that we have given. And secondly, clearly they can't be contrary to the legislative intent as best our intent can be determined, because if it can, the Attorney General has already disapproved the regulation. Now, the bigger problem, though, is that oftentimes we use language such as is present in this bill. The language in question is, and it's in section 11, the second full paragraph, the Commissioner shall adopt rules and regulations on or before January 1, 2022, as are necessary to administer this act. You will find that phrase or similar phrases throughout our statutes. I would venture to say that 95% of the regulations in the statute book are adopted because we as the legislature included that type of a clause that says the agency may adopt regulations in furtherance of this act. And that's necessary. You and I do not have the time nor the expertise to write the cosmetology regulations, for example, or the fair food and pure drug regulations, or how many fire alarms there should be in a motel. Those sorts of things is beyond our expertise. That's why we give the agency the authority to write the regulations. However, if we want to stop what many perceive as abuses of that authority, then what you don't do is grant open-ended authority to promulgate a regulation in furtherance of the bill. Instead, you include very specific language that says the agency may promulgate regulations concerning the number of fire alarms in a motel. But you don't give the agency carte blanche authority to adopt regulations, anything having to do with the bill you just passed. Or if there's something you don't want to see happen, you include in the legislation that, for example, the State Department of Health and Environment or the state school board shall not provide by regulation for diphtheria vaccinations. You just put it in the law when you pass it, and then they can't do it, and then the Attorney General won't approve it. That is a more tedious legislative process. It takes more time, it takes more effort in committee, and it would arguably take more time on the floor to debate what in essence are provisos, saying the agency can't do this under this law. But that's the way that you respond to this concern. So as much as I have problems with beneficent, I join in the chairman's suggestion that we not Christmas tree up this bill with this language, but instead, if there are specific things you don't want the commissioner to do pursuant to this law, then you put a list of what it is the commissioner cannot do despite your general grant of authority. And so for that reason, I rise in opposition to the amendment, but with great respect for the good work that my past chair has done, and I look forward to voters and leadership allowing the opportunity to work with her again next year. So thank you for your patience with me, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Estes.
Will the carrier of the amendment stand for questions, please? Okay.
God bless you. Yes, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. So we're hearing that there's an elaborate process. Have you always found that elaborate process to work?
The Office of the Budget Department goes over it, the Secretary of State goes over it, the Attorney General, they can only do a certain amount, and then it all comes to joint rules and regs, and we're supposed to say yes or no, and when we say no, they just kind of laugh, and then they just go on their merry way.
Okay. So previous speakers have mentioned the courts as a resolution. Do you find that all Kansans can afford to challenge things in the court and wait the time that a court process takes before their business or their livelihood or other things are impacted?
No, I don't think they can. And as well, it would save the legislature money too.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your questions. Answers.
Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, I do not object to this amendment, and I'll leave it up to the will of the body.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My apologies for extending this conversation any further than it needs to go, but I felt like I needed to speak on this particular subject. The Department of Labor was mentioned earlier, and yes, there is a process for these regulations to be reviewed, and they were reviewed. If you recall, we passed a bill a few years ago that required any new regulation to go through the industries, and if it would affect the industry by more than $3 million over a 2-year period, they were invalid. These regulations that the Department of Labor brought, and the 3 that are left, will certainly affect workers' compensation premiums by well more than $3 million over the next 2 years. Well more. That form that was filled out, said, who did you talk to? It said attorneys from the industry. Well, no one in the industry can recall who those attorneys were. And when it asked, how did you come up with your figure? The form says NA. That's not an answer. But the director of the budget signed off on it, so therefore these regulations go into effect, and they do, in fact, change statute. They're in direct conflict with our statutes. There's a way to change those statutes, and that comes through a committee process, not through regulating. And so, you know, it's been said that this might change the agreement. I would argue that it solidifies the agreement, because this keeps the department from changing regulations that might affect this agreement. And so I stand in support of this, and we need to put this kind of language in every single bill. Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Wassinger, you may close on your amendment.
Madam Chair, I close.
You've heard the motion by Representative Wassinger to amend. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. The ayes appear to have it. Division has been called for. The clerk will open the roll and you may cast your vote. Has every member had an opportunity to vote? Clerk will close the roll and take the tally. 49 voting in favor, 63 voting against. Amendment fails. We're back on the bill. Further discussion, Representative Poskin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, body. The carrier of the bill did a fantastic job. I rise in support of House Bill 2489. Thank you.
Further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, Representative Hoheisel, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports HB 2489 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Hoheisel to report out House Bill 2489 favorably. For all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Motion passes. The next item of business is House Bill 2537. For purposes of carrying House Bill 2537, the chair recognizes Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There were no committee amendments on this bill. Body, House Bill 2537 amends a statute that governs hearings by the Commissioner of Insurance. This provision allows a person to request a hearing if they have been subjected to an order by the commissioner. And it would be in accordance with the Kansas Administrative Procedures Act. So if a person is given an order by the commissioner, they may request a hearing. And this bill says that if they request a hearing, then the Commissioner of Insurance shall give a hearing. And there were no committee amendments. There were the proponents, one proponent, the Kansas Department of Insurance, was neutral. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Does any member desire to speak to the bill? Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is the legislation that I had intended to address today. I spent careful time in preparation of a fine speech, and I therefore ask that you vote in favor of HB 2537. It's good legislation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Humphries, you may close.
Thank you, body. Madam Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports HB 2537 favorable for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Humphries to report House Bill 2537 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. The bill is adopted, or yeah, motion passes. Good enough. I got a little carried away there. I'm sorry. The final item of business for today is Senate Bill 337. For purposes of carrying Senate Bill 337, the chair recognizes Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There were no committee amendments. SB 337 would amend provisions pertaining to the pilot program established within the Technology-Enabled Fiduciary Financial Institutions Act, otherwise known as the TEFI Act, to clarify and retroactively codify the intended date for the issuance of a full charter to the beneficent company. The bill would specify that on December 31st, 2021, the conditional charter granted under this pilot program shall be converted to a full fiduciary financial institution charter. This was a compromise between the Office of the Banking Commissioner and the beneficent group. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Discussion on the bill. Representative Poskin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Once again, the carrier of the bill did a fine job. I stand in support of Senate Bill 337.
Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Anderson, you may close.
With that, Madam Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it report SB 337 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Anderson to report Senate Bill 337 favorably. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion passes. This concludes our general orders. The chair recognizes the majority leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move we rise and report.
You've heard the motion to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
The clerk will read the committee report.
Mr. Speaker, your committee of the whole recommends House Bill 2537 be passed and Senate Bill 337 be passed. House Bill 2489 be passed as amended.
Speaker recognizes Representative Arnberger Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, or Mr. Speaker. I move we rise and we pass the committee report.
You've heard the motion to adopt the committee report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee report is adopted. Changes of reference. House Bill 2559 is withdrawn from the Committee of the Whole and referred to the Committee on Agriculture. Reports of standing committees, the clerk will read.
Committee on Judiciary recommends House Bill 2154 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Transportation recommends House Bill 2597 be passed. Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice recommends House Bill 2607 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Committee on Water recommends Senate Bill 358 be passed.
Is there any objection to returning to that order of business, introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions? Seeing no objection, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2710 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning alcoholic beverages, increasing the percentage of alcohol by volume in domestic table wine and domestic fortified wine.
Are there announcements? Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Democrats, we will have agenda tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. in 152 South, and we'll be starting at 8:30 a.m. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Rogers.
Republicans, we will have a caucus. It's been so long. We'll have caucus tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in the old Supreme Court room. Representative Wassinger will be our speaker. Thank you.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Attention commerce fans, making an agenda change for tomorrow. We're going to add a hearing on House Bill 2701. Not looking for testimony on it, but you're welcome to come testify. But this addresses the Kansas Rural Housing Incentive District that we did last year. It has a small change in it, so thank you.
Representative Penn.
GOP Freshman Caucus, we will be meeting today for lunch down at 622 Van Buren, where we will have a presentation by Assistant Majority Leader Mason. I hope that you can join us today directly following. Thank you.
Representative Croft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Body, I just want to announce the establishment of a Veterans Caucus. It'll be combined with us in the Senate, and anybody else that wants to join, more details will come out for next week's first meeting. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Arnberger Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Future caucus, don't forget we have dinner tomorrow night. If you have not RSVP'd, please do so we can get a proper head count. Thank you.
Representative Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wyandotte County Delegation, we will not be having a meeting today. No lunch meeting today. We will assume those next week.
Are there any further announcements? Seeing none, Speaker recognizes Majority Leader Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, tomorrow morning we have Bible study at 7 a.m. in room 142 South. We're discussing Rising to Greatness, Restoring a Brother. Republicans, we have calendar tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. in the old Supreme Court room. Mr. Speaker, I move the House adjourn until Wednesday, February 16th at 11 a.m.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The House is adjourned.